Hello Year 3, welcome back. If you remember, it ended on a very exciting point yesterday. So Susie had flown Fletcher's wand at Lady Crepuscular, and it almost had seemed to make everything around her stop. There is a picture here that you can see, Lady Crepuscular and Susie throwing the wand, and there was a jam jar, or a glass jar, that had shattered in front of her. The next chapter is chapter 21. It's called A Glitch in Time. Susie opened one eye a slither, expecting some sort of horror to strike her. Instead, there was just silence, an unnatural stillness. Very cautiously, she opened both eyes and looked around. Crepuscular stood before her, her outstretched hand just a few centimetres away, but she didn't move, she didn't speak. And the jam jar that Susie had seen shatter before she shut her eyes was exactly as it had been. A burst of glass shards frozen in mid-air, winking in the light of the chandeliers. Very tentatively indeed, Susie reached out and touched one. It didn't fall, but it didn't move under a little pressure from her fingertip. It also cut her, and she snatched her finger back and stuck it to her mouth, and she took in the rest of the room. Everything was frozen. Fletch had been caught reaching for his wand, which had bounced away from the breaking jar and now sat in the air just beyond Crepuscular's elbow. Behind Susie, Gertrude still reached for the spot where Wilmot had stood, her face a mask of sadness and pain, the tears as solid and immobile as the glass on her cheeks. Susie looked away from her quickly, feeling her own tears start. What happened? Frederick's voice was so unexpected that she nearly dropped him. I don't know, she sobbed. Everything just stopped. Except us, said Frederick. What did you do? Was it a spell? No, Her voice felt thick and sluggish with tears. I don't know what I did. Well, whatever it was, it worked, said Frederick. This is our chance. Let's go. No, she said. What about Wilmot? What about him? Said Frederick. You saw what happened. He's gone. Finished. No, she ran to the shadow, banked like a static thundercloud behind Crepuscular, and passed into it as easily as if it was smoke. The room looked dark from inside it, the light from the chandeliers stained a sickly purple. She cupped her free hand around her mouth and shouted, Wilmot! Wilmot, are you in here? He won't answer, said Frederick, and she very nearly hurled him across the room. This was all his fault, his and hers. Wilmot! She raced from one side of the vault to the other, groping through the darkness for any sign of life. But when she stumbled back into the light behind Crepuscular, she knew Frederick was right. Wilmot was gone. Please, Susie, Frederick pleaded. I don't know what's happened here, but we have to get away before it all unsticks. The fate of all the impossible places. I know, she snapped, pouring the tears from her eyes. Just give me a minute, will you? He was right, of course. That was the worst part. Whatever was happening, it was their only chance at escape. They couldn't afford not to take it. She blinked, the salt sting from her vision, and looked around. We still need the wand, she said. We can't break your curse without it. It didn't give as easily as the glass had, but it twisted a little, and by leaning back and applying her whole weight against it, she was able to drag it slowly free of its spot in the air. Now we can go, said Frederick, as she stuffed it back into her pocket. Not quite, she said. She patted her other pocket to make sure the neuroglobe was still safe, then crossed to the point where Wilmot had stood and picked up his fallen cap. She straightened it, dusted it off. Then she threw her own cap aside and pulled Wilmot's down over her hair. It was tight, but it just fitted. Now we can go, she said. None of this would have happened if you hadn't told them about me, he went on. You promised to keep me a secret. I also promised to do my best as a postie, she said, squeezing between two of the statues. I couldn't keep doing both. Besides, things had changed. I thought they would be able to help us. She paused in front of Gertrude and finally looked her in the eyes. The life was still in them, but Gertrude was as unresponsive as a photograph. Susie placed a hand on the troll's shoulder. I'm sorry. She paused at the secret exit and took a final look at the room. Then she turned and ran. She had expected to step out of the post office into the noise and bustle of the living city, but the silence outside was absolute as well. The old guard stood frozen in various attitudes of flight in the alleyway behind the building. Dorothy had taken the lead, pulling Mr. Trellis along by the hand. Susie waved her hand in front of Dorothy's face and called her name, but she knew it was fruitless. Turning sadly away, she hurried around the building and into the square. It was a snapshot of chaos. Statues blocked every street, while the cars, bikes and various unclassifiable vehicles were trapped in the midst of evasive manoeuvres, their drivers frozen in a myriad of poses, shaking their fists or jumping clear of impending disaster. She must have bought every single statue, she said. A whole army. At least they're stuck too, said Frederick. What do you suppose happened? It's everywhere. Must be something to do with the jar, she said, fighting her way through the stalled traffic towards the opposite side of the square. Or the wand. I don't even know how it's supposed to work. I think you point it at something and just sort of feel what you might want to happen, said Frederick, but I don't see how they could cause a whole city to stop. She bit her lip with worry. Can we call someone? What do you mean? I mean, is there any way of contacting someone in charge? The union must have a prime minister or a president or something. Someone to send for help. No, he said, starting to sound uncomfortable. At least not officially. There are things we all share, like the postal service and the ether web. But each impossible place is supposed to govern itself. The trolls have their council of elders. The Clockwork Kingdom as its chief automaton, and nobody even knows how the Wicker Woman of High Heath do things, because nobody who's ever asked them has ever been seen again. Everywhere is different. And we are going to leave it there, and you're going to carry on the rest on Monday. See you next time, Year 3.